Why did Marx's views on the means of achieving socialism differ from the socialists of the past? Also, why did Marx feel differently about industrialization than his predecessors? The answer in part lies in the historical situation in which Marx was writing.
While Marx certainly felt that capitalism was exploiting the people, he also felt it was quite progressive, in the sense that it offered the opportunity to free people from necessity. See, Marx believed that freedom came when people did not have to worry about producing the things necessary for survival. Marx saw the potential in industrialization because it allowed for the production of enough goods that all people could survive. Clearly, he felt that the benefits of industrialization were not reaching the common people, and that is why he proposed such drastic changes. But you can see how his attitude differed from that of earlier socialists. Marx's attitude towards industrialization and his emphasis on revolution represent a shift in socialist thought. I think it's important to understand that by the mid-19th century, when Marx was writing, industrialization was changing. While Marx still detested the terrible working conditions of the factories, he still noticed that there was great industrial production. You see that in Great Britain, France, and Germany between 1830, the time of the French utopian socialists, and 1860, the time of Marx, industrialization was growing. It in fact doubled during that time, per capita rates of industrialization. So this may help explain why Marx chose revolution over seclusion in a small utopian society with limited industrial output. Also, we see revolutionary fervor sweep across Europe around the time of Marx's writing, which may help explain why he felt revolution was necessary as opposed to the formation of these small utopian societies. Starting in Greece, there's revolution in 1821. Moving to France, where Marx in fact spent part of his life, revolution breaks out in 1830. And then in 1848, at the time of the publication of the Communist Manifesto, revolutions are beginning in France, Prussia, as well as Austria. So you can see that the prevalence of the revolution at this time may have inspired some of the revolutionary sentiment.
Fundamentally, it's about different class interests. In other words, there are sort of more middle-class reformers who seeking to sort of get working people behind them and say, hey, vote for me, I'm a socialist, I support, workers' power. And then once they get into office, they sort of end up just tinkering with or modifying the system. And that's because they come from sort of a more middle-class position that is neither interested or frankly able to like radically transform capitalism. Whereas, in the labor movement, for example, people like Eugene Debs, in terms of U.S. history, who was a famous American socialist, they had a more working class kind of conception of socialism, that workers had to actually take power and fight for their own interests and not just stop at this or that reform of the system. So I think that's sort of the base of it. In the case of China, for example, it's a different sort of class context in which you have this sort of guerrilla army in the countryside made up of intellectuals and so on, who sort of claim to at least speak for the peasants. And what they mean by socialism is putting themselves in power, as sort of the enlightened minority or whatever, whose role is to rule on behalf of the peasantry or whatever, and that comes from their sort of their class position and the policies that sort of conform to that. So I think at the root of it is really class differences and sort of the historical and political, but more so the historical sort of way that different classes and different sort of political forces or parties have sort of co-opted or used or distorted even, or inverted socialism for their own ends.
Karl Marx's writings left a huge impact on many socialists who adopted and adapted his ideas, resulting in a plethora of distinct socialist groups. How did the lifestyles, economic situations, and political or theological views of these various groups of people influence their interpretations of socialist theory? How did these groups differ from each other? Find out when we return after a brief message from our sponsors. The most notable early case of Marx's influence was the Socialist Democratic Party of Germany, an industrial workers' party created in 1875 when a Marxist group merged with the followers of German Ferdinand Lassalle. The two thinkers were ideologically very much at odds with each other. LaSalle believed in a national socialist movement resulting in the changes to the established governmental systems, whereas Marx was convinced that the only way for socialism to work was through an international societal transformation and overthrow of the state. The solution that the Social Democratic Party found was to call for a radical self-emancipation of labor, which struck a chord with labor unions, but in practice remained conservative enough to get things done. The Social Democratic Party rapidly became the most popular party in Germany, and by 1914 it had amassed upward of 1 million members. Although Marx himself was a confirmed atheist, calling religion the opiate of the masses, Marx's ideas influenced some members of the Christian faith who had grown conscious of the idea that a union between modern industry and religion had to be forged in order to meet the needs of the populace. Saint-Simon created a new Christianity that combined Christian morals with socialist economics. Similarly, Frederick Maurice and Charles Kingsley in England began the Christian socialist movement, based off the idea that Christianity was much more compatible with the neighborly, community-oriented spirit of socialism than the competitive, self-motivated capitalism. Marx's arguments for a dictatorship-controlled society did not resonate with his fellow communist, the Russian Mikhail Bakunin. Bakunin argued that capitalism and religion are the enemies of the people, and also that the state must be abolished. Bakunin not only wanted to abolish these institutions, but to smash them to bits. In 1842 he wrote,
"The passion for destruction is also a creative passion."
However, he had a dispute with Marx over the communist societal structure.
While Marx believed that a dictatorship was necessary in order to achieve the communist goal of a classless and stateless community, Bakunin was resolutely against any form of social hierarchy. As a driving force behind the anarchist movement, he believed that a dictatorship was a giant step in the wrong direction, that it could threaten the common person even more than the current established state. A dictatorship, you see, has no bureaucracy or empowered upper class to check its growth and prevent it from descending into a systematic oppression of the proletariat.
While anarcho-communism never attracted a massive following, it did inspire some less extreme activists such as Peter Kropotkin and Emma Goldman, who campaigned heavily against religion, capitalism, and the state, and argued that anarchism is quite feasible in modern society. But what would life really be like in a socialist society?
Life in a socialist country must be very strict, or must be very tense also. You also have to be careful to say anything against the government, and you're just always under tight scrutiny, and there's always Big Brother that's kind of watching over your soldier.
Oh, I don't like communism. I mean, like, it might be good for some people, but if I'm a doctor, I want to make my money, and if I'm a hobo, there's no money there, so yeah.
Not necessarily bad. I mean, it depends on how corrupt the government is and how effective it's working. But I mean, there's a lot of benefits, because then you get free education and free healthcare and all that other stuff. And you don't have to worry about that.
It would be very similar to what we have now, except for probably more taxes and free healthcare. I don't know.
Actually, I have never lived in a socialist or a communist society, so I really wouldn't know how it would be. But from what I know, I feel a little brainwashed, and I feel like I didn't really have the right to really do anything that I wanted.
I think that ideally it would be very nice, and that everyone would be equal, and hopefully wouldn't be social injustice, but just in general, I don't think that's possible for human nature. It's very selfish and stuff. So
In truth, it's very difficult to say. So far, every country that has claimed to be socialist has had very different styles of life.